Well, welcome to the 13th of May, 2020, as we all get here in the throes of the COVID-19 virus and our quarantine. Hope you are doing well and all your family is doing well out there. Tonight, we're going to entertain and inform you, hopefully. We are very privileged to have a special guest. Let's get started on the first two slides so we get started on the show. And I'm going to see that. There you go. The Lessons of Vietnam show. We try to tell the real story of the Vietnam War and the men and women who fought it. There's so many mistruths and downright lies and bad information out there. We're trying to tell the real story. I am your host, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran 67, 68. I went through a little thing called TET. We're broadcast courtesy of Nissan Communications in their worldwide headquarters in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you need to contact me with any suggestions and so forth, that's you can get me at dixonbill80@yahoo.com. Now, we'd like to invite you to participate in the show. During the show, you can call in or go back in as you see the number there, 919-518-9773, and you can ask our guest questions, make comments, or whatever. Or even better, go on to Skype and it's computers 2K voice, and you can ask questions, make comments, talk about him as being, as a Marine tank guy, or whatever you want to do. During this time of quarantine and all the pressure and not being able to see families and so forth, it's kind of a tough time for a lot of people. If you are a veteran, you know a veteran, and you're having some crisis, please pick up the phone and call these people. They got some people there who are veterans who just nothing better than want to do than to help you and get you through this time. So just reach out to them and so forth. Clyde, how you doing? I'm gonna go to the next slide before I show you Clyde.
I'm doing well, Bill. Thank you for having me on.
All right, certainly. I'm gonna round on. Can we do the next slide? We're not seeing it for some reason. Okay, we're gonna go right on and forget that slide. Clyde, I'm glad to have you. You're my first tank guy on the show, and I'm looking forward to it. My last show was on tanks, the tanks of Vietnam, because I had a guy ask me one time, were there really tanks in Vietnam? Because of all the swamps and so forth. And so I'm going to let you get started telling about how you got it, where you grew up, how you got in the Marine Corps, and how you ended up in Vietnam.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a small town, and all us kids used to get together and play Army all the time. And it was my intention to go in the Army. My brother was in the Army. So I had my heart set on the Army. And then one of the guys mentioned the Marine Corps. And I never heard of that before. So I got a couple of books and started reading about it. And so I was kind of hooked. And so I enlisted 3 months before I graduated high school.
That's pretty young to go in. And so forth. Did you go to Paris Island? Did you go to?
I went to Paris Island.
California. Paris Island.
And like a genius, I went June, July, and August, the hottest months.
Oh, yeah, that's a good time to do it. The mosquitoes and everything else are doing well down there, and the cotton mounts.
The sand fleas were terrible.
What I got you ready for the NOM? Where were you stationed after basic? Did you go straight into? You didn't go straight to NOM after that, did you?
No. I went to basic training and then infantry training. At that time, everybody went through infantry training.
Yeah.
And then
everybody in the Marine Corps is an infantryman.
Yes. And then they sent me to 2nd Tank Battalion, Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And they stated, okay, you're in 2nd Tanks, you're on leave now, go home for a couple weeks. And I had no clue what I was going to be doing or what it was all about. So when I got back, 4 of us arrived at the same time, 4 new people. And they said the normal progression on a tank at that time was the loader, the driver, the gunner, and then the tank commander. So for some reason, they made me a driver right away. which, just out of boot camp, a little bit afraid of everything, but it was kind of intimidating. I mean, my schooling in driving a tank was put the helmet on and do what they tell you. So that was pretty much it. And then I heard we were going to go on a med cruise, and I didn't know what a med cruise was, but the United States has a battalion of Marines and a fleet of ships in the Mediterranean at all times in case civilians have to be evacuated or embassies have to be evacuated. So I asked the guys, how do you get a tank on a ship? And they said, well, you'll see. So I figured they didn't know either. So we loaded the tanks on railroad cars, and this is one of the scariest things for me in the beginning, is that there was this real steep concrete ramp, and the railroad car was back up to it. So I had to drive the tank up the ramp, and when you're sitting in the front of the tank, you can't see nothing but sky. And I know the tracks hung over the railroad car 6 to 8 inches on each side. So you had to be lined up perfectly. And like I said, you can't see nothing, and you just keep inching it forward, and all of a sudden it comes crashing down, and you got to just hope you're right on. So that was kind of a scary experience for me. But we took the tanks out to Morehead City, North Carolina, and we unloaded them, and we sat on the beach and waited for the fleet. And the fleet came in. They were probably a mile out, and the type of ship we were on was an LSD, landing ship dock, and they had a big tailgate in the back of it, and they opened the tailgate and they partially flooded it, and these smaller boats came out, Mike boats and a U-boat came out, and they drove right up onto the shore and dropped the ramp in the front, and then we backed the tank up onto that boat. They raised the ramp, and then they backed it off the shore and drove it into the back of the ship. And then they brought the tailgate back up, pumped the water out, and we chained the tanks to the boats, and the boats got chained to the ships, and away we went for the Mediterranean. So here we are, here I am just out of high school, and in the Mediterranean, you can go in bars at any age. So we were kind of going crazy there as young kids, we had a hell of a time. But I came back from the Mediterranean, and for 6 months we were over, came back for 6 months, and I got sent back over again for another 6 months. But this time was better because I knew what was going on over there. Yeah. So we had a great time. And then I came home from that, and I don't know why, but my whole career in the Marine Corps, they kept sending me to different places. They sent me temporarily to the brig at Camp Lejeune. So I was at the brig for, I think, 6 weeks. And I became a brig guard there. And after that, I went back to my unit. And then they sent me to try out for the silent drill team in 8th and I in Washington, D.C. And I wanted no part of that. I mean, I'm used to the diesel fuel in the tanks. And these guys, they spend at least 5 hours before they do a performance getting ready for it, shining everything, buttons, boots, shoes. And to me, that was something I did not want to do. I begged them to let me go back to my unit. And I told them that I enlisted in the Marine Corps to go to Vietnam. And that's what I wanted to do. So they sent me back, and soon after that, I got orders to go to Vietnam. And I arrived in Vietnam in the middle of Tet of 1968. And my first day in Vietnam, of course, you remember what it's like getting off the plane, the heat, the smell. And they put us, we got there late in the day, they put us in this big barracks. And there was hundreds of it in there. I didn't know a single person. And then they told me the next day to wait, and a Jeep would come by and pick me up. So I'm standing there, and a Jeep pulls up. I said, "You going to first tanks?" I said, "No." Another Jeep pulls up. They said, "You going to first tanks?" They said, "No." So I figured I'd just wait there until somebody said first tanks. Finally, after like an hour or so, a Jeep pulled in and said, "Anybody going to first tanks?" So I threw my seat bag in and jumped in, and they took me up to battalion headquarters in Da Nang. And a staff sergeant told me to pick a rack out that I would be spending the night there. So I started, threw my seat bag on a cot, and the staff sergeant walked in, and I remember him from the flight over. We talked on the flight over quite a bit. So I was happy to see somebody I knew a little bit. So we're standing there talking, and this warrant officer comes in, and he said he needs 2 people to man a tank. And the staff sergeant said, I'll volunteer. And he points to me and said, he will too. So the warrant officer said he has 2 people, and he needed 2 more. So the staff sergeant was the tank commander, and I asked him if I could be the loader so I could sit on top and watch where we're going and see what's going on in this country. So I was the loader, and this is the only time I was ever on any kind of an operation where 1 tank went. And they sent us out about 5 miles southwest of Da Nang, and we sat there at this little tower. They had a tower there, and there was 12 grunts, infantry, manning the tower, and they rotated in shifts, and they watched the area, and so they could warn Da Nang of any incoming. So here we are with 12 grunts, 4 people in the tank, and a tank, and we're sitting there, and they saw it had a real sharp drop off down to a river, and then the other side of the river was jungle. And they saw a North Vietnamese in uniform watching something with binoculars on the other side of the river. And they called Da Nang and asked if we could fire on them with the tanks. And they said no, because they had a patrol close to them. So finally, the staff sergeant goes up in the tower, and he comes back down. He didn't look too happy. I said, what's up? And he said, he's got an intelligence report that a battalion of North Vietnamese are coming towards us with civilians in front. And I'm thinking, I don't know how many's in a battalion of North Vietnamese, but here we are, 12 grunts and 4 guys in a tank. I mean, they're going to go through us like nothing. And I said, are we going to get any kind of reinforcements? He said, no. And I'm thinking to myself, these people back home are going to think that idiot couldn't last 2 days over there. Now, this is my first full day in Vietnam. Yes. So all of a sudden, artillery starts firing over top of us. And they were unloaded quite a bit. And I kept thinking, I know they get a short round sometimes. So that kind of concerned me. But then it started to get dark. And all of a sudden, these aerial flares came down. And they make like a woofing sound when they come down, and they brighten the whole area up. And then I remember seeing, like, it looked like a fluorescent rope coming down, and it was puff. And as you know, every 5th round was a tracer, but they fired so fast it looked like a straight a rope coming down, a fluorescent rope. And and then finally everything died down. The staff sergeant said, "Get some sleep, and I'll take the first watch." So he did, and I was amazed. I actually fell asleep. And then I woke up, and it was my turn to watch. And I'm sitting on top of the tank thinking, it's so damn dark out here. They could be 2 feet from the tank, and I wouldn't even know it. And there was ravines coming up the sides. And I'm thinking, man, I hope they don't come on my watch. I don't want to be responsible for this. And then my watch was over, and I was amazed. I fell back to sleep again. I woke up, the sun was shining, it was quiet. I said to the staff sergeant, what happened? And he said, well, I guess the artillery and the puff broke them all up. So that was my first full day in Vietnam. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to make it over here. I will never survive this.
Yeah. And that's quite an introduction to the rest of the tour.
So then I got sent to company headquarters, and of course I was made a tank commander right away. And then in the Marine Corps at that time, there was 5 tanks in a platoon, and then the platoon was split. The first 3 tanks were considered the heavy section, and then the second 2 tanks were considered the light section, and each section had a section leader too. So I quickly became a section leader, and I think it was pretty much downhill since then, ever since then. But I mean, I never ever closed the hatches except for one time when we got our own artillery. I closed the hatches then. But other than that, I was always from chest up. I always wanted to see what was going on because it was my responsibility to make sure these guys made it home again. So I always exposed myself chest up all the time. And I got so many sniper fires and our rocket propelled grenades. The rocket propelled grenades, an M48A3, which is a tank we had at that time. You guys in the Army called them Patton, but they were rounded, pretty much rounded. So an RPG had to hit right or it would ricochet off. And we had so many ricochet off the side of them. And lots of times when it ricocheted, it would hit the crew members too. And if it hit right, it would burn a hole through the size of a quarter. And then all that shrapnel would go flying around the inside of the tank.
Yeah, what was you would drive? What were they? Pattons?
They were Pattons,
yeah.
M48A3s.
Yeah.
But there was three different types of tanks that were called Pattons too.
Yes.
In the Army.
The Army's had a smaller Patton with a smaller interior. I forgot the nomenclature on it. You know, when the Marines brought the first tanks in, Westmoreland didn't think there was a place for tanks in Vietnam, but the Marines showed that there was definitely a place for it. And that's when they started bringing them in. But originally, they didn't want tanks over there.
But that was because the Marine Corps had battalion landing teams, and tanks were part of those landing teams. They were told to take their landing team in there. Nobody said don't take the tanks. So they took the whole battalion landing team in. And then they realized that it wasn't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So
how many times you get stuck?
Stuck?
Yeah.
I myself don't remember ever getting stuck.
Oh, okay.
But there was times when you went out there and felt the ground a little bit to see how stable it was. Yeah. But I remember one tank in our outfit, he did get stuck, and it was stuck so bad they had two tanks pulling on it, and they still couldn't get it. And they got one of those Jolly Green Giants, and he was lifting from the top, and they still couldn't get it. So they brought in all kinds of lumber and stuff that underneath there.
Yeah. Well, it was a little more. It was a little more a better dirt where you were than down in the Delta where I was, because we got stuck often. I rode personnel carriers sometime in APCs, and we stuck those up. You couldn't get the back door open. But a little bit of soil up there in the Central Highlands where you were.
Yeah, it was a lot of sand up there. Yeah. And in the monsoon season, they actually called us back in, and most of the time we were attached to infantry units, like 2 tanks, 3 tanks to an infantry unit. And a lot of people don't know this, but we were attached to the Korean Marines in Vietnam. They didn't have their own tanks over there, so we were attached to them, and we lived with them and went on operations, and we were with them quite a bit. And
everybody was scared of the rocks.
What's that?
Everybody was scared to death of the rocks.
We were too when we first got with them, but after we got used to them, actually one of my guys punched one in the face and he ran away. Huh. We heard all kinds of stories about them, and even like when we were in combat with them, if they captured captured somebody, they were so nasty to them. Yeah. And but we already got sniper fire when they came running up around the tanks, like, so I mean, from my understanding is when they first got over there, they were great. And then the United States gave them a hard time about being too aggressive. So then they backed off. They didn't want nobody killed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, your area of operation, you were at Da Nang. Did you go all the way up to the DMZ or?
No, we were south of Da Nang. We were in an area called the Rocket Belt. Yeah. And it was a hook came off the Ho Chi Minh Trail right where we are. So it was like a transit area. And everybody we ran into were North Vietnamese regulars, and they were very well equipped and well trained.
Oh, they had basically same equipment and training that we had. So
they had, yeah, if not better. But
Tet, we didn't want much Viet Cong left after Tet. All of us had hardcore NVA. So
a couple of interesting things that happened, if you want to hear about them, is on one particular operation with the Korean Marines, we were going through an open field, and we had Korean Marines, a tank, Korean Marines, a tank, and Korean Marines. Well, the tank on the other side, I heard an explosion and I saw dirt fly real low. So I assumed he hit a mine. And I called them on the radios. I couldn't understand them. All of a sudden, they started opening up on us. And I didn't understand what the other tank commander was trying to tell me over the radios. So I ran from my tank over to his tank and talked to him, ran back again, and he got hit with 2 RPGs. And his driver got hit with one ricochet and hit the back of the driver. So he got medevaced out. And I felt that my tank was good, so he should have a full crew. So I sent my driver over to drive for him. And we only had a 3-man crew then. And I asked the Korean lieutenant if he had somebody who could speak English that we could use for a loader. And he said, actually, the lieutenant jumped in himself. And he looked around, and it's pretty intimidating because there's not much room in there, and you have 62 90-millimeter rounds in there. And he looked around, and he jumped out. And then he sent a corpsman in. And the corpsman, he looked around, and he jumped out. And then they sent this poor private in, and this guy was shaking. And between the gunner and myself, we got him to load. And for some reason, the Koreans tried to flank around the other side, and they, like 6 or 8 of them got hit pretty bad. They left them there in the field, and they asked us to go get them. So I took my tank around, and like 4 Koreans followed real close behind the tank, used it as cover, and we pulled in front of these guys, and the Koreans in the back loaded them on the back of the tank. As they were doing this, I remember seeing a flash out of the corner of my eye. This was real strange things that happened to me. And I saw a flash, and I saw a cloud of smoke. The cloud of smoke started getting bigger and bigger, and there was a little black speck in that smoke, and that started getting bigger and bigger. And I finally realized that was an RPG. And I swear it was going to hit me right in the head, but I couldn't get out of the way. But yet it looked like it was coming in slow motion. It looked like the whole thing took like 5 minutes. And I watched it come, and it went just right over my head. I remember seeing it was black and had fins on it. And it was a weird experience because it seemed like that took 5 minutes, you know? And I told the loader to throw in a Willie Peter white phosphorus, and we fired that. I figured it gives us a little bit of cover to back out with. So we backed out. They took the wounded off the back of the tank, and they took them back by hand. And while we covered these guys, and the other tank commander was senior to me, so he ran the show, and he said, we're going to pull back. I said, let's pull back by leaps and bounds. One tank pulls like 75 feet behind the other tank, and he covers them while the other tank pulls back. And I turned the turret around, and I told my driver to turn the tank around. So as he was turning the tank, I was turning the turret, so we could fire on the guy. And that wasn't the best thing to do because the back of the tank is the most exposed and the easiest to penetrate. And I told him to pass the other tank by about 75 feet and stop. He said, "What other tank?" And I turned around and looked. Everybody was gone. The company of Korean Marines were gone. The other tank was gone. And all of a sudden, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of North Vietnamese started coming towards us, shooting at us with RPGs and rifle fire. And I remember thinking to myself, now I know what Custer felt like. And I remember telling the driver with a whole bunch of different words in there that I won't repeat to floor this thing and keep it floored until we get back there. And when we got back, I was so mad at the other, he was a staff sergeant, and I was so mad at him that I avoided him because I was afraid of what I'd do.
Yeah.
That experience, and my worst experience, I hit a booby trap with my tank, and I hit a pretty big landmine. And the landmine actually changed my life. I was never the same person after that. Um, we were in an operation with American Marines, and we were a blocking force. So we sat there with 2 tanks. We had a lieutenant with, but he left me run the show because he was new. And we sat there, and we expected to spend the night there, eating cold sea rations and sleeping next to the tank on the ground. And we got a call that said, "Come on back in." So we were all happy. We were going back in. The company headquarters had showers. They had everything. So we were all happy. We were heading back in, and it was a nice sunny day. I was sitting on the tank commander's hatch, and I'll never forget. All of a sudden, I remember taking a real deep breath, and it was all extremely hot air. And then everything started getting fuzzy, and I remember thinking to myself, this is it. And the next thing I remembered, my life was like a brown blob. And I remember talking to myself, saying, "Come on, you got to snap out of this. You can't let go. You can't do this. You got to come back." And it seemed like maybe I talked to myself for 20 minutes. How long it actually was, I don't know. But then I started to function a little bit, and I remember I saw a little bit of like fuzzy light, and it reminded me of like when you drink a glass of water, you look down through the bottom of it. Everything was all distorted. And then I finally started to function a little bit, and I didn't understand what happened. So finally I realized we hit a mine, and there was pretty many wounded uh, infantry grunts from from the blast, and it was the same side I was on, and I never heard the explosion. That's what puzzled me so bad. But the tank was laying in a hole probably 5 feet round and 3 feet deep, and it blew off the first 3 road wheels, and it was the same side I was on. So that changed my life, because after that I had a hard time making decisions. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't like anybody. I kept to myself, and luckily that was late in my time in Vietnam. And they gave me orders for drill instructor school, and I thought, I'll never make it through drill instructor school because I can't remember hardly anything anymore. And so I opted to get out of the Marine Corps then. So that was the worst day of my life. And of course, you probably have post-traumatic stress disorder also, right?
That's being an engineer. I wasn't out as much as you were. I went out quite a bit. When I went out, I usually went out with the 9th Infantry guys. I would see tanks, and I always wondered about the tanks with that big spotlight on the front. That seemed like it would be a great target.
As a matter of fact, we had wounded one time, and they asked me to shine a spotlight for the helicopter to come in. Well, so I showed it a spot where it looked like it was good for him to land. Well, instead of landing where I'm showing this thing, he tried to land on top of the tank where the light was coming from, the source of it. And I was actually bending because they finally kept, calling him off. And finally he did go off. But then we put the wounded on there, and he started to take off, and he got hit in the hydraulics, and it came back down again. And they got another helicopter out there. They took the whole crew and everybody, and then they'd fly the crew out to work on the helicopters during the day, and they pick them up at night. And I'm thinking, man, this ain't right. Those guys are going back to warm meals, nice beds, and here we are sleeping in the swamps. Life is just not fair.
I imagine the tank got pretty hot over there in that sun. I'm certain they want air conditioning.
Well, in the mornings when it was cool.
Yeah.
Had cool mornings. Metal was cool. So it took like midday till it even started to get warm. And then in the evenings, it was hot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very hot in there.
I imagine it was, especially when you were working, loading, and so forth, and moving around in there. So you came back, and what did you do after you came back?
When I came back was the worst time of my life. I had such a hard time readjusting. I seemed like I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. And you know, two of my best friends were both killed in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I started drinking and very heavily. And that drinking lasted for many, many years. But that
A lot of my friends came back with the same situation. Some of them actually went out and lived in the woods for a long time, but a lot of them lived out of a Jack Daniel's bottle for a long time.
yeah, yeah. And it's just probably the last 5 or 6 years where I kind of really cut back big time.
I know you got a service dog. His name is
Cooper.
Cooper. That's right, Cooper. Yeah. Mine's laying here beside me. His name is Tank.
Cooper's laying over here.
Tank didn't let me get out of his sight, so I think it's amazing how good a job they do and so forth. What kind of a job did you take when you came back, or be able to work there for a while?
I took several different types of jobs, and I just was never happy with any of them. And then I started as a laborer in a construction company.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked my way up in brick and block. I worked my way up to a foreman, and there it was easy to get away with the drinking in construction, much more so than being in like a factory or industry.
Uh-huh. Well, listen, let's see. You wrote a book called Tracks, The Memories of a Vietnam Veteran, and then you wrote a book called Tanks, A Century of Dominating the Battlefield, and you wrote a book, let's see, a Barman. That I guess that's a Browning automatic rifle.
BAR, man, Browning automatic rifle.
Okay, and you wrote one, a Man Down, and Albion, and Tribute to Tanks. What's It Like? Marine Corps Boot Camp. And then you got one, let's see, the biography of Linda and Cooper. And then you've got one, God Help Me. How did you get into writing? You said it was by accident, and you were obviously very busy writing these things. And did you find them healing, or was it? I imagine it was pretty hard to go back and bring those thoughts back to write it down on paper.
It is. It's still hard. Like sometimes I'll be with other people and they want to watch a movie and it's about Vietnam, and I have a hard time watching it. But the whole writing thing totally got started by accident. The last thing I ever expected to do in my life was to write a book, because I was a horrible student in school. I was terrible. All I cared about was getting out of there. But an elderly neighbor came by and we sat and we talked. And he told me about the town. He lived there all his life. And when he left, I thought, what an interesting story. When he's gone, his story's going to be gone. And then I thought, well, everybody's got a story. So I decided to put my military experience down on the computer in chapter form as it came to me. And I wanted to make sure I was right. So I sent it to like 3 guys I was with in Vietnam. And I sent it to my daughter to proofread, and she said, you have to make this into a book. And for that first book, I was selected as one of the 50 great writers you should be reading by the author show. And then my 4th book won a bronze medal at Reader's Favorite International Awards Contest. So that kind of encouraged me to write more.
Yeah. Which one was your first one?
The first one was Tracks, Memoirs of a Vietnam Veteran.
Yeah, okay.
That's my experiences. And
I have tried to do that, Clyde, and I can't get through it. I keep trying to write it all and put it all down on paper. I haven't been able to do it. In fact, there's a group here that started it's called Brothers Like These. It's Vietnam vets who have started a writing project, kind of a healing through the vet centers and so forth, and hoping to get one started here pretty soon. But I haven't been able to do it, so I admire you being able to sit down and put that down. And there was a couple of books you wrote. Was it fiction, some of them, or all?
One was fiction. One was fiction.
Which one?
Uh, I'll be on.
Oh, okay. All right.
But to me, I have to be very inspired by a person before I can write. Mm-hmm. And, all the profits from my books, I donate to veterans organizations. And I write to inspire and to make people, like for instance, the biography of Linda. She was a young Chinese girl, and they had to flee China because her father was educated and wealthy. So they left China with nothing, went to North Vietnam, then they went to South Vietnam, and she got caught up in the Vietnam War. She had a super abusive mother. It was really nasty to her. And then she met an American, and he brought her over here, and they married. And she became they both drove tractor and trailer. They drove together. But he'd sleep, she drives, and they'd switch off. But she became a very patriotic, hardworking American. And to me, that's an inspiring story for people. Mm-hmm. My favorite book was The BAR Man. That was a story about a man that lived up the street here from me. And he did some amazing things in the Korean War. And then he got wounded by American airplanes, and he got captured by the Chinese. And he was forced to march 200 miles with no medical attention. And he was held as a POW for 2.5 years under some pretty bad conditions.
Yeah, it was pretty cold there. So,
yeah.
Well, there's a group of men here that I sure like to see their story written. They were Arvin Rangers. When Saigon fell, they continued fighting. They did not give up. A friend of mine said it was a major. He said he went from machine gun to 12 years in slave labor. And when he walked out, he didn't have any identification, didn't have a piece of paper saying who he was. He walked out with nothing. And of course, he lives here now and has done very well for himself. But they've got quite a story. Their time they were up north in the jungles and the woods. They were having to cut trees, so forth, down, take sticks and go out and find landmines and dig them up and so forth. And there's 4 or 5 of them live right here in my neighborhood that I've gotten real friends with. And that's quite a story. They don't speak English very well sometimes. So we have basically find out we're better off talking through emails sometimes in person to person. But they have a story that really needs to be told.
Those are the kind of stories that need to be preserved for future generations.
Yeah. Well, you've written the books. You thinking about writing another one? You already working on one, or?
No, my big thing now is the Veterans Brotherhood.
All right, I want you to talk a little bit about the Veterans Brotherhood and so forth while we got some time, and tell us how you got into that, what it's doing, and how the people out there watching this show can do something about it, helping you, or join it, or start another wing wherever they are, or whatever. Tell us about how you got involved with that.
Well, I work for Lehigh County District Attorney's Office as a volunteer veterans mentor, where a veteran got in trouble with the law, minor infractions, and they would put a veteran with him to help him along and get him back on his feet. And some of these guys just need somebody to talk to. Where then I thought to myself, why not get them before they get in trouble with the law? Why not get them when they really need help? And then on my 4th book, I started researching veteran suicides, and I was amazed the amount of veteran suicides. Amazed. And you know what surprised me? It's people my and your age. It's not the younger ones that are committing suicide. We're at a higher rate than the younger ones are.
Yeah, the Vietnam veteran came back and was too busy having a family, taking care of the family. But now, as we're retiring, we got time on our hands, and those feelings we've been pushed down all this time is coming back, and it's a real challenge out there. I stand with the Patriot Guard. Those are the guys who go and stand in honor guard at funerals and so forth. And it's amazing how many times in a given month we stand for a suicide. Some of these guys, you just wonder, they had so much going for them. Why they give up and so forth. But then again, I've been there myself, so just like you have. But it is amazing. People just, 22 a day. That's not a number. That's a man. That's a man, a woman who offered everything they had for this country, and we just kind of it's not convenient sometimes to look at them. So I'm really impressed with what you started with that. Tell us about the Brotherhood.
Well, we started out. I mean, I never expected it to expand to what it is today, but we're at the point now where the Veterans Administration calls us and asks us to help. But what we do, as soon as we hear about a veteran that's homeless, we take them off the streets, we put them up in a hotel, and then we evaluate what's best for them for their future. And we also pay car repairs, fuel bills, so make sure they're not freezing. And once in a while we get them food. And no one's paid in the organization. It's all volunteer, and our donations come from individuals and businesses and church groups, and it's all really great. The people in the Veterans Brotherhood are some of the finest people you're going to ever meet.
Yes.
And we have a core group that meets once a month before this all went down. But we have a core group that meets once a month. But we have members as far as Kentucky, Texas, and they we have our core group that when an email comes in, we send it to our core group, an email requesting help. We send it to our core group, and our board members decide yay or nay on and how much we should help this person. So then we send it out to the members so they understand what's going on and what we do. And unfortunately, I don't think the members see enough of what we do, because it's almost every single day that we help a veteran in one way or another. But we had the most outstanding people you could ever find in our organization. I'm so proud to be part of this organization.
Now, you out of Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Okay.
But we help people as far as Indiana and Texas already.
Okay. All right. So if someone wanted to donate some money, how would they go about doing it?
Well, they can send it to the address is Veterans Brotherhood, 313 4th Street, Pennsburg, PA, 18073.
That's Pennsburg.
Yes.
Okay. Now you've got a website they could go and get that address from.
We do. We do have a website, yes, and a Facebook page.
I thought it was amazing how many veterans you started out helping and how many you're helping now.
Well, last year we helped right around 100, and that's not including the family members too. Some of these guys had children and wives and stuff. But another thing I'd like to talk to you about too, real quick, is we're in the process of making a film called The Journey Home, and it's about post-traumatic stress disorder. And the reason we're doing that is because we have a Gold Star mother involved in our organization, and she said if she didn't know about our organization before, her son would be alive today. But he commits suicide. So we want this film so that a son or daughter, a mother or father, can understand what their son or daughter is going through and kind of understand what it's all about. Because it's very difficult for a veteran to talk to their family members about their experiences.
Yes, they don't understand at all, and that makes the veteran more frustrated and so forth. That's one of the things I enjoy about group is to get together and talk with other veterans. I find I have I'm a whole lot easier to talk to other veterans than I am civilians even today.
Yes.
I'm 75. It's been 50 years since I was in Vietnam, but it's still easier to talk to another veteran. We give each other a bunch of junk, but at the same time, we're there and we understand.
The other veteran understands.
Yeah.
Hey, Clyde,
Yes.
Can we have the web address? I mean, just to mention that you have one is one thing, but people would like to know where.
And can you show the slides?
I've been showing it all along. I don't know
Oh,
what you're.
we
I don't
haven't
know
seen
what
it,
you're
so-
looking at.
Okay. All
But
right. The last
what
slide, the last two slides has the information.
Oh, I didn't go to the last.
It's hard to get good producers. That's okay. Keep going. We're gonna have to hear about that tank picture there too. Go ahead. Keep going.
I didn't know there were that many of them.
Keep going. Keep going. That was kind of blurry, but that's the Veterans Brotherhood Incorporated. Is headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have monthly meetings that are held at the Lehigh Valley Active Life Center, 1633 Elm Street.
Okay, you don't need to read the whole thing. It does not.
I'm not.
It does not have a web address. No, it does not have a web address. I want the web address if
okay.
Clyde
the web
has it.
Is go ahead. Clyde.
It's veteransbrotherhood.vet.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, go ahead, Clyde.
So anyway, we want this film. We've been working on this for about 3 years now. It's going to be a full-length film, and we have this movie producer. It's called. His company is Films for Good, and he's producing it for us. But we've been working on this for probably 3 years now, and another reason we want this is so that like police officers and hospital workers and EMTs, people, first responders, can understand what a veteran's going through also. Because a lot of people, even hospital workers, don't understand post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. Well, you started out with working on the Veterans Legal Project, where you were working with veterans, the Veterans Court.
Yes.
With the Attorney General.
Yes.
Or attorney. Yeah. It's kind of we got a little bit of that here in North Carolina, but not as much as it needs to be. Where they kind of take a veteran out and kind of work with him a little closer than some of the other people to try to get it from being a repeat and so forth. So, when you think you have the film, how are you going to distribute it?
Well, we're gonna do what we can to distribute it. What we plan on having is like a grand showing in our area here, but we plan on distributing it in probably on every channel you can distribute it on. YouTube. I mean, we're not out to make a whole lot of money. We'd like to recoup what we put into it.
Yeah.
But somehow we'd like to recoup it. But we're going to stream it also.
Okay. If you listen, I would love to put it on the show, like this show sometime, and maybe get some people, organizations to use it. And kick in some money but use it. Different organizations throughout the country. We go all over the world with this show, but when you're ready and you are interested, I'd love to put it on the show and show it to people.
Sounds good to me.
So,
can we let Clyde talk about the slides now?
Okay, we're going to go back and let Clyde talk about the slides a little bit as we go back. All right, that's all of his. That's his shadow box. Clyde, go ahead.
Yeah, that's my awards. That's myself and Cooper.
That was your shadow box.
Yes,
I saw was your shadow box.
This one's me and Cooper, right?
Oh, that one is now. Okay, I see it. Yes.
And I have a recliner. He's not allowed to lay on the furniture in the living room, but in here he's allowed to. So he just, when I work on the computer, he just lays in the recliner and sleeps.
Yeah.
And this is Tanks: A Century of Dominating the Battlefield, and that's a film that I produced. And it starts out in World War I with the first tanks, American tanks, and then it follows the progression of American tanks all the way up to the M1A1. And in that movie, I made the movie about 4 or 5 years ago. I predicted that tanks would be obsolete in the future, and now the Marine Corps is getting rid of tanks.
Yes, they're turning them over to the Army.
And that's an artist's rendition of my tank in Vietnam. It was done by a man named Mark Cherms, and he's internationally renowned military artist. He does a lot of magazine covers, book covers, very famous artist. And that's my 4th book. That book won a bronze medal at Reader's Favorite International Awards Contest, which for somebody, it amazes me because most people that write books are educated, and here I am, a dummy, and it got an award, a medal.
That looks like you and a younger you.
In my boot camp.
Okay.
And that's here I am in Miami getting the bronze medal. And that is my last tank crew in Vietnam. And then I'll ask you what pick out me, because nobody ever gets it. Can you tell which one's me?
That was the logo for the Brotherhood. That was back. I was up for a second. Let's see. There it is. That's the logo for the Brotherhood. And that was the address and so forth. And so hopefully people will reach out and find some more information about it. What you're doing is so important. Hopefully they can come through with some money to help you continue going on, because what you're doing is so very important with the veterans out there, with the Vietnam vets. Even the younger vets are coming off. They need a place to stay. They need some time to, like you said, for a long time, you lived in a Jack Daniels bottle. And this, if we can eliminate some of that and help these people, what you're doing is so very important. And
we also have 4 members that are certified mentors, and that's a big thing with veterans, because a veteran would rather talk to another veteran than they would a therapist or a psychiatrist, because the veteran went through the same thing. When a therapist and psychiatrist, they read it out of a book and they don't quite get it.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about working with the vet centers. What you say at a vet center stays there, and what you say at the VA goes on your record. But the vet centers, they're not going to ask you if you have a weapon. They're not going to ask you all these questions. What you say at the vet center stays there.
Yes.
And then we groups with other veterans, and we sit down and give each other a hard time and BS. But I look forward to it every week, and to the vet center. A lot of guys came back and didn't like me. I heard the word VA. I'm running the other way. I didn't want anything to do with the VA.
Well, when I first came back, I went to the VA for some issues, and they pretty much told me to get lost, and they didn't even want to talk to me.
Yeah, kind of like the American Legion of VFW when we came back.
Well, I didn't even go. Well, I had a bad experience with the VFW one, so I stayed away from them too.
Well, I'm a member now, and most of us are Vietnam vets. There, we got an honor post, and it's changed a whole lot. So,
when I went to a VFW, and one of the guys told me, "You can't join here." I was in a real war. That was a conflict. He gave me such a hard time. I figured.
Yeah, most of us went through that. When you came back, did you have a hard time with people giving you a hard time when you came back? I know when I came back in June of '68, we were basically told to take our uniforms off. I came back in through Travis Air Force Base in California, told to take our uniforms off. But I was coming home like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I flew from California to North Carolina, so most of the protesters were in bed asleep. But so I missed them, and I was still in the Army, so I ended up at Fort Hood, and with a whole lot of other Vietnam vets. So did you run into protests and so forth?
No, I don't know if it was the time or what, but I all my civilian clothes got blown up. So I had no civilian clothes. So I had to wear my uniform. But I didn't have a problem getting to my house. But after I was at my house, I had a lot of problems. Like you go have a beer or something, and you mention the military, and right away you get into an argument and a fight with somebody, you know? So I stopped talking about the military. And I think because of that, most of us didn't associate with each other at that time. And so it was, you know, like the guys I was with in Vietnam, it's only been the last 10 years where we started talking to each other. Before that, we got rid of our uniforms. We got rid of anything that had anything to do with the military.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, we have paid the price, and the younger vets today don't have to pay that price.
And that's one of the reasons I started this Veterans Brotherhood, because I don't want any other human being to have to go through what I did. And we talked about suicide. I don't think there was a day that went by and I didn't think about suicide. And the biggest thing that prevented me from it was I felt God put us here for a reason, and it wouldn't be right for me to cut that reason short.
Yeah. Well, I was married 3 years when I went to Vietnam, and I'm still married to the same woman. I have put up with her for all these years.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, living with a Vietnam vet's got to be easy. So I put up with her for all these years, and you know, she's got me through a whole lot and put up with me through a whole lot. But I'm certainly glad that there's organizations now like yours out there. And like I said, I hope our audience here steps forward and helps you and maybe get something going where they are doing the same thing, because you're a hero with what you're doing. We all served in Vietnam. We did our thing. The heroes in Vietnam are the ones on the wall.
Agreed.
You're a hero in what you're doing now and reaching out and making it possible for other veterans to have a better life and solve some of these problems that we went through. And so I really appreciate you and what you're doing, and looking forward to working with you some more later, whatever. But if there's anything I can do to help you or whatever, anything you want to put on the show, let me know, and we'll see what we can do about putting something together. And I haven't had a chance to order you some of your books. I got a couple of your books I want to order. I still definitely want the one on Cooper, and so I have not had a chance to read them yet, but I'm looking forward to that opportunity to get them and read them. I'm usually running about 2 or 3 books behind. I try to get all my guests and authors read their books. Right now, I'm working on the next show, which looks like it's going to be a 3-parter, and because it's gotten so complex and so forth. By the way, those of you out there, just real quickly, our next show is May 27th. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it.
While he's finding the dates,
27th.
Clyde, while he's finding the dates and everything, say hi to your sister. She's been watching for the whole hour.
My sister?
She said, I'm Clyde's sister.
Assistant or sister?
Sister.
Which one?
Mildred.
Mildred, she does all my editing for me. Anytime anybody that writes has to have an editor, because when you go through it 5, 6, 7 times, you skip things. So she does all my editing for me.
Nice.
And one thing I want to mention too, thanks for watching, Mel. But one thing I want to mention too is if anybody wants to be a member of the Veterans Brotherhood, they can contact me but by my email. It's on all the information about the Veterans Brotherhood. If you go to veteransbrotherhood.vet, you can get that information and contact me, and I'll put you on our mailing list if you want to be.
All right, I'll do that right as we hang up and so forth. For those of you out there who have friends that you would like to see this show, you can watch this show again. Just go on to the Nissan Communications, like you got here. Check on demand and pick out from the LOV show, the Lessons of Vietnam show, this show, and for your friends, it'll be on YouTube probably tomorrow, if not tonight. I'm not certain how fast you get that out there. But you go to On Demand, you can see any of the past shows we have done. especially you're out there and you want your friends to see what Clyde Hoch has had to say, they can go in just like you did, except go on demand and watch the show and get more information out there about
and the next show is, and when is the next show?
The next show is the 27th day of May. By the way, the 16th of May is Armed Forces Day. The 22nd of May is National Maritime Day. And of course, the 25th of May is Memorial Day. And even though most of us still looks like we're going to be quarantined for Memorial Day, take a time during the day to reflect on the men and women who gave everything they had for this country, and for us, especially those of us here in this country. Just if you have to stay home, there'll probably be something on TV about Memorial Day, but take time and reflect on what you're doing out there. And Clyde, I appreciate you being on the show. I really enjoy it. You put out some great information. I'd like to talk to you some more later about tanks. I can imagine when that bomb went off, if you don't remember hearing it, it probably rang your bell to the basically unconscious for a little while. That's probably why you don't remember anything. And I can imagine that RPG got real big as it was coming at you. I know I'd have to go change, but I wouldn't say change underwear because we didn't wear them. But you get the idea there when it's coming through. But appreciate your service and what you've done and your sacrifices. Like I said, for what you're doing now, you're a real hero, and we're all glad and very fortunate that you're doing out there with what you're doing. And hopefully, get you some more members and some people who are wanting to help you out with that, because it's a fantastic program you got going. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Amnon, and thank you, Mel.
Now, Amnon was in the 6-day war.
I talked to him a little bit about it.
Yeah, we can talk some more later, but we're running overtime now. Bill is stretching it.
All right. Well, cut us off.
No. Say it. End it nice.
Clyde, hang on for a little bit after we cut off.
All right.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.